Welcome to the show. My name is Reed Huberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Today, I'm going to try to provide a redeemed perspective on the news. I believe Christian ideas are the cure for a broken culture. And I'm not sure if you noticed, but it's pretty broken. But there is hope. Before I jump into the show today, I want to make sure that you know that we are sponsored by our friends over at Sweet and Savory Classroom. Now, if you want a great learning experience, you want to learn how to cook some of the most fantastic meals, have an entertaining time while you're doing it, maybe have a great date night or Valentine's Day event, then you need to check out our friends over at Sweet and Savory. You can do that by going to sweetandsavoryclassroom.com, and you can get a discount when you check out with the promo code IndieThinker. Back in 1963, a landmark case was held by the Supreme Court called Jacobellis v. Ohio. And in this case, Jacobellis argued that his First Amendment rights were being violated by the state of Ohio because he owned a small theater and he wanted to show the French film The Lovers. Now, you might already be able to guess what kind of film The Lovers was, because I called it French. And if by that you guessed that it was stupid, pontificating, full of feminist dogma, and all about sex, you would be absolutely correct. And this is why the state of Ohio said you can't show this film. Well, Jacobellis argued that his First Amendment right, his right to free speech, was being violated by the state of Ohio, and the Supreme Court actually ruled in his favor. In fact, you will probably not know this case, but you will know maybe one of the famous phrases that came out of this when, in the majority decision, Supreme Court Justice Stewart argued that the First Amendment protects a person's right to free speech, even if it is to show explicit content. That's kind of an odd argument that you have the right to show whatever movie you want because you're expressing free speech. But that's an argument for a different day. But most importantly is the rationale behind this, is that he said that the First Amendment protects explicit speech, but not speech that is deemed obscene. So it doesn't protect obscene speech. And then when pressed to define what he means by that, he simply said this, that you know obscenity when you see it. Now, the judge was technically right about at least one thing here. He is right about the fact that beauty exists and we all know it when we see it. Nobody goes to the Grand Canyon and looks at it and says to themselves, oh my God, how garish and ugly. Everybody knows that the Grand Canyon is beautiful. So, objective beauty exists. And we can all see it based upon reason. Now, we may not be able to find it in a lab, and the scientific naturalist can't explain it at all from his worldview, and the materialist can't explain it at all from his worldview, but the Christian obviously can, because we believe that a creator God made these things, and you can see his beauty in creation. So he is right about that. Beauty exists. And we all know it does, even if we can't necessarily argue our way towards objective beauty. But there's something deep inside of us, maybe say our soul, that sings when we see something that is truly beautiful. But he was wrong about all of the other things that actually matter in this case. First of all, he was wrong about the Constitution. Our founding fathers would be rolling in their grave if they heard someone suggest that the First Amendment was actually meant to protect somebody who wanted to show explicit films. This is akin to what I hear atheists argue all the time. Well, Jesus never said that you shouldn't smoke pot, therefore have at it, bro. And smoke it everywhere all the time while we're in traffic so that everybody else has to smell your junk. And, you know, I've seen this too with homosexual arguments and the homosexual lifestyle. Well, Jesus never explicitly said anything about it, which first of all isn't true. He did. And second of all, wasn't totally necessary given the context and the audience that he was speaking to at the time. It would have been inconceivable for them to actually think that Jesus would even have to say that that was wrong. Now, the second thing that he was wrong about is the fact that we know obscenity when we see it. Now, this judge might have been able to know it when he sees it, but our culture certainly doesn't. Now, to illustrate this, back in '63, the reason this film was so controversial is that it showed on screen a woman's face as she was being, let's just say, pleasured, for the sake of kids who may be listening. Now, there was nothing explicit in terms of body parts being shown or anything like that. It just showed a scene where this was taking place and a woman who was enjoying her time while it was taking place. And this, for the time, was obscene. Now, it almost seems ridiculous in our present time that something like that would even be considered explicit because of the things that we see. However, this is indicative of the fact that culture so often shifts and it impacts our ability to truly know that which is good, that which is beautiful, that which is true, and that which is ugly. And for proof of this, please let me take you to a recent event. And I know you probably don't know it took place because nobody cares, but the Grammys just took place, and there you can see garishness on display because the people who are supposedly enlightened and artists and the ones who are trying to display beauty for the world showed us things like this. Now, I call this castle head. This is Jaden Smith wearing a literal castle on his head.
Jaden, you look retarded, bro.
I can only assume that a person who goes around with a castle on their head is crying out for spiritual help. And maybe, if nothing else, and they don't know that they can get spiritual help, at least crying out for psychiatric help. This is a cry to the world that my parents are jacked up and I desperately need healing in my heart. And then we have Billie Eilish here, who is wearing what I can only call a costume for Halloween that would be titled Blind Hobo, maybe if it had like one of those packages from Spirit of Halloween. And then we have Chapel Roan, who is somebody that I've never heard of before in my life, but now I will never forget this image etched in my mind. And if you're not watching the podcast, you should be, because I can only explain what's on the screen now as drag queen meets Raggedy Ann doll. She's got a mop on her head, looks a little bit like Marie Antoinette in white makeup. So yeah, very, very interesting. And then we have Joy Villa, who is letting us all know that it might be slightly cold outside, and we didn't need to know that from you. And then is also wearing a dog purse, which is amazing. And by the way, for those of you who need to hear this, this is totally free, totally extra, public service announcement. Your dogs are not your kids, and don't put them on your purse. And then we have Lady Gaga, who is wearing Wicked Witch of the West meets Meth Lab, I suppose. And you probably knew I was leading to this final person, but of course we have Bianca Censori, who does us the job of turning around backwards to take off her coat to reveal that she is basically just wearing absolutely nothing. So we've gone from a culture that shows a woman's face in a film and based upon the context might be deemed as explicit and even obscene to naked women prancing around on national television for one of the stupidest events that we televise. All that to say is that we live in a world that doesn't understand obscenity and doesn't understand evil. Might this be that because we don't truly understand what is beautiful and we don't have an objective metric to judge that by in our postmodern, post-Christian world? For Aristotle, his way of understanding what is beautiful went something like this. We know what is beautiful based upon what he called the golden mean. So we know that if something is beauty in excess, then it's garish and it's not beautiful. But if it's deprived of beauty, then it is ugly. And so we need something that's more in the middle, and then it meets the golden mean. And we know that golden mean by reason. But here's the problem with Aristotle's argument. Not only that we live in a culture of stupid people that don't take into account these kind of things and weigh virtues like this, but also because it is too vague. So how do we know when we've ventured into garishness or when we ventured into ugliness? Let me put it this way. A good illustration for this is the person who sees an old woman being mugged. If you know beyond a shadow of a doubt, let's say, that if you go try to protect that woman, you will be killed. And your wife and your kids will suffer as a result of not having their father in the house anymore. Well, if you know that, then you probably wouldn't do it because that would venture into foolhardiness rather than courage. But of course, if you don't do that, then aren't you a coward? So there's really no way of knowing exactly what bravery would look like in that situation without a higher transcendent source to deem for us what exactly the beautiful is. And this is why, in the present, we gladly jump into the obscene without blinking an eye. We don't know obscenity when we see it unless we are deriving our understanding from an objective standard. And then once we get that standard, anything that deviates from the standard we can tell is either an excess of something or a deprivation of something. And here's the reality. One of two things is going to be that standard for you. Either culture is going to be the measuring stick or scripture is going to be the measuring stick for how you truly understand what is beautiful and that which is obscene. If you don't want the kind of garishness that you saw at the Grammys to define us, then it's time that we chose the latter to truly be our measuring stick for all of truth, all of goodness and all of beauty. And speaking of recognizing the true, the good, and the beautiful, Donald Trump just shocked every single person on the planet by announcing his Middle East policy, especially in terms of Gaza, that he actually intends to make this a U.S. territory. Here's him talking about it.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
So does Donald Trump actually intend to make Gaza a territory of the United States? And maybe a bigger question, can he even do anything like this? This is one of the amazing things about having Donald Trump as president that even you leftists have to agree with. The guy is entertaining, a mile a minute, and he's always doing something. So let's step back for a moment and just ask, can Donald Trump actually make Gaza a territory of the United States and do all the things that he's talking about right now? And I think the answer to that, as far as I can tell, and this is one of the good things about striking while the iron's hot, is that there's not a lot of information, so I don't have to dig too much through it, to just say that maybe he can do it. I'm not entirely sure that he actually can, that the United States has a legal right to go in after a war and then claim Gaza as its own, but it would be the most Donald Trump thing on the planet to go ahead and just plant an American flag in the middle of all of that. But even if you somehow object to this because you believe that America needs to get away from its neo-colonial racist past and that we shouldn't go in and help these people who are truly struggling and will continue to struggle if we don't do anything about that. May I remind you that Donald Trump's kind of business strategy, and remember he is a businessman, is one of maybe like an ancient barbarian. Like he's berserker mode, and he kind of just goes in and suggests things that he may not necessarily have the ability to do. Now, a lot of people who hate Donald Trump and are blinded by Trump derangement syndrome will call this dumb, but actually think there's a bit of brilliance behind this, that he may just be saying something to get a reaction from opponents, and maybe he's just spouting off good ideas. I mean, it could just be a huge good idea. I don't know. All that to say that there could be some strategy underneath all of this. So don't forget typical Trump in the midst of this. But underneath it is a moral question, which is what we really try to get to here at Indie Thinker, because whenever we talk about foreign policy, whenever we talk about laws, we think to ourselves, well, what we would desire is a more moral and good society. And of course, I argue on the show all the time in order to achieve that end, you need to draw from Christian scripture and from Christian virtue. So the real question is, should he do it? If he can do it? And again, that's still questionable. And I think the answer is yes. So this doesn't mean that he's displacing the people there and getting rid of all Palestinians. No. And Donald Trump says this much. It just means that this place has been devastated and is in a difficult spot. But there's also an implicit, if not explicit, admission here that now it's in disarray as a result of what Israel has done, yes, but because Hamas has been totally eliminated from this place, and now there is no political leadership here in the Gaza Strip. So therefore, there's unrest, and there needs to be some stability brought to the nation. For all of you Free Palestine protesters out there, let me assure you, Palestine is free now, but that doesn't mean it will remain free. There will be other Muslim terrorist organizations who come in to fill the void if somebody doesn't take action. So for all of those isolationists out there, let me remind you that we still are a nation that at our core have a desire to make the world a better place through the American experiment. And Donald Trump clearly isn't a pure isolationist. I do believe in America first, but I also believe if we have the opportunity to keep Muslims from going into a place, terrorizing Christians, and continuing to persecute Jews, that perhaps maybe we should think about possibly doing that and doing it for the sake of the Palestinian people. Because bringing stability to that region is an absolute beautiful thing. But Donald Trump doesn't want to just bring stability to it. He's even suggesting that perhaps he's going to make the Gaza Strip the Riviera of the Middle East. Check it out.
Where exactly are you suggesting that they should go? And two, are you saying they should return after it's rebuilt? And if not, who do you envision living there?
I envision a world, people living there, the world's people. I think you'll make that into an international, unbelievable place. I think the potential in the Gaza Strip is unbelievable. And I think the entire world, representatives from all over the world will be there, and they'll live there. Palestinians also. Palestinians will live there. Many people will live there. But they've tried the other, and they've tried it for decades and decades and decades. It's not going to work. It didn't work. It will never work. And you have to learn from history. History has, you just can't let it keep repeating itself. We have an opportunity to do something that could be phenomenal. And I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent. But more importantly than that is the people that have been absolutely destroyed that live there now can live in peace in a much better situation because they're living in hell.
Now, I have to tell you, I'm very surprised that in the aftermath of this, leftists aren't totally freaking out. And I think it's just because of Donald Trump's berserker strategy. I think that they're so disoriented by the suggestion that we may go in and turn the Gaza Strip into the French Riviera that people don't know what to think about this. But trust me, they will come out and find some way to figure out how this is a bad thing, where I think it's an objectively good thing if you can bring stability to the region and make this place that was once controlled by a horrible terrorist organization actually a place of prosperity and peace. So even the leftist out there, if Donald Trump keeps on doing these kind of things, has to sit back and appreciate it. I mean, Donald Trump thus far has been the most pro-life president, I think, in American history. I think it's fair to say that in terms of rolling back policies that end the life of innocent human beings, protecting those pro-life activists who were just expressing their First Amendment right, and more. I think Donald Trump is clearly the most pro-life president in American history, which is so crazy still to say. But then he's secured our border, and he's, through using the power of tariffs, or at least the stick and the carrot of tariffs, he's agreed with Canada and Mexico about making sure that they secure their side of the border and we secure our side of the border. Recruiting for the military has skyrocketed since Donald Trump took back over. He is creating a fiscally responsible government that isn't spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands on trans musicals across the globe. I'm sure you've probably seen the ridiculous list that USAID has been funding. All that to say, he's also peeling back control of China in the Panama Canal and perhaps in other places. He's reestablished working relationships with our allies. And if he then, after all of that, within just a couple of weeks of being in office, returns Gaza into a place of prosperity, then I think you have to say that Donald Trump is one of the most seminal figures in American history, certainly over the last 100 years. But you can rest assured that Democrats probably won't admit that because they are so blinded by hate. And this is where I have to wax a little bit spiritual here and come to a question that I think undergirds all of this, and that Donald Trump makes us ask constantly. What does it take to actually change? What does it take to actually shift your opinion about somebody? Again, if Donald Trump takes the Gaza in its current state, reduced to rubble, and helps the people of Palestine actually experience freedom for the first time in their lives, this is going to be something that, of course, will be incredibly controversial, but undeniably will be a good for the world and for those people. And still there are people who will be so blinded by their hatred for Donald Trump that they can't see any silver lining in any of the things that he's done. So what does it take for us to actually change? And I'm going to argue that the thing that we need to actually change our perspective and change our thinking and to break out of our echo chambers is God. And without him, we won't. The best explanation for this that I can think of is the idea of secularism. There is no more committed, ideologically foolish worldview than that of secularism. And here's why I say that. It is akin to kind of like a mythological perspective, a fairy tale of sorts, because it rests purely on conjecture in terms of the origin of life and the origin of the universe. It is merely faith perspectives based on minimal, if any, evidence whatsoever. How the world began and how life began and how we are here. Conscious beings who are meaning-seeking beings and moral agents. How did that come from evolution? The secularists cannot tell you that whatsoever. And more importantly, they are an anti-intellectual movement in the sense that they are committed to militating against religion or religious ideas. Even if those ideas aren't necessarily true, they will still militate against them even if they are beneficial to society, as Christianity has been to the West, because they are so dogmatically blinded by their hate. And what are they hating? Well, of course, they're hating God, or any vestige of God, or any beliefs about God. They will pull the Jenga block of religion outside of Western civilization without a single care of what will happen if that Jenga tower comes tumbling down once you remove that fundamental building block. All of that is a blind ideology predicated upon hate, and in particular, hate of the one thing that can objectively, if true, truly change your heart and your mind. In other words, I'm saying this: if you find God, you can truly find change. And speaking of change, Disney may be changing. Now, don't you do it. Don't you break my heart again, Disney.
I would say arguably the gayest Star Wars, I think, by a considerable...
Because Disney just released the trailer for the Fantastic Four. And I have to say, I'm somewhat optimistic. So I do want to respond to the trailer because I think that there is some silver linings here. But also, I wanted to respond to it because I didn't want to be the only common sense Christian conservative responding to the release of the trailer. Because Michael Knowles did a response video, and it was an absolute murder scene.
I don't know what the Fantastic Four is. I don't know who's making this movie. And I expect that it won't be good, based purely on prejudice.
I'll be the first to admit, I'm not into nerddom or fandom or anything like that as far as comic book movies are concerned. You give me the choice to watch a movie and I want to watch Les Mis. No, not the dumb one with all this singing and Russell Crowe.
It's for what you did, the rest because you tried to run.
But the one with Liam Neeson. The best, I would say, theatrical depiction of Les Mis. Absolutely fantastic. I want to watch The Count of Monte Cristo. I want to watch movies that make you think. I like highbrow stuff like that. Of course, not French film.
It's a well-known fact of life that nobody likes the French.
We're not talking about art house, but things with a real powerful, meaningful message. Serious, sober films. But even I know something about the Fantastic Four and its impact on culture. I mean, who doesn't know this iconic cover of the Fantastic Four comic book? I don't even know if this is like a first run of the story or anything like that, but I'm familiar with this and know that like first issue of that comic book is incredibly expensive because it's incredibly iconic. So Michael Knowles knows nothing about it and therefore probably should mostly remain silent, whereas I will come in and give you the expert take on the trailer for this film. So let's just quickly jump into it. By the way, this trailer had millions of views within like 30 minutes of it being released.
Welcome to the Baxter Building.
We make a point to do family dinner every week. Sunday at 7 on...
Now, I love that already. Family dinner, you got this kind of iconic 50s, it looks like maybe 60s, 50s kind of feel to this film. So they're trying to, at least initially, strike a chord with a conservative idea of what the family looks like and family values. Now, will they find a way to destroy that? Probably, knowing Disney. But hope against hope. My prayers are that actually they might make a film that praises the value of family. I know it's a wild thought.
On the dot, no matter what, we're all here.
Herbie, how's that sauce coming?
Yeah, I'll be the judge of that.
Okay, cool. I like the fact that they're not necessarily running away from camp. The Kirby thing was always a dorky part of this story, but they're leaning into it and trying to make it at least a functional part of the story. And then, of course, you have Thing here, who actually looks true to what he looked like in the comics. Every iteration of The Thing thus far has been absolutely atrocious. But here he kind of actually looks pretty good.
Okay. Okay, is this guy good or what?
I want to add a couple cloves of garlic. Not because it's not delicious, I just want to add a little bit of zip, okay?
T-5.
Okay, so kind of campy again, but fun at least. Not something that's totally taking itself too seriously, but maybe something that will actually communicate a redemptive and useful message, especially for families. Who knows? Maybe even this film will be family friendly.
Before we went up the first time, you couldn't turn invisible. Ben wasn't a rock.
The best pilot in the world right here.
Yeah. Best looking, he means.
And Johnny never caught fire.
Ben has always been a rock. Johnny is Johnny.
Hi.
And I am right here. Whatever life throws at us, we'll face it together.
Don't know who the old dude is, and again, I'm not necessarily into these kind of comic book stories, so I don't really even care. But I will tell you, I do know who that horned guy is, and again, this is a kind of throwback to this iconic comic book cover of the Fantastic Four and its original run. And what that tells me, maybe, hopefully, we'll see, is that they intend on trying to actually cater to their audience. I know it's a crazy thing. I don't think it's that superhero movies and superhero fatigue is what is causing people to run away from these films. You know what I think it is? I think it's largely that Disney especially has been murdering these films, and these films are supposed to be pure nostalgia bait. That's all there is to it. They're nostalgia bait, and I think that they should unapologetically realize that. When you create a film that is nostalgia bait, and then you butcher the story for identitarian politics reasons, you push us back into the present rather than conserving the past. But because these liberals are so, and progressives are so insane, they constantly cannot help but remind us, oh yeah, it might have been good back there, but don't forget all the progress we've made here by, mutilating children and all of that. They cannot help themselves. But maybe, just maybe, against all hope, they might actually be making a movie that reminds us of the way things were in the past, telling a conservative story and actually not have to apologize for it.
As a family.
Okay, so that's the trailer, and I have to acknowledge that final scene where they're a family and they're all standing together. I do have to take notice of something that is wild. They're all white. I know, crazy, but they were all white in the original story, and it might be okay not to have to try to diversify the cast to do, again, what Disney often does, which is to apologize for the way things were in the past by somehow trying to rectify it in the present, rather than just saying, hey, this is the way the story was, and it was perfectly fine back then, it's perfectly fine now. All that to say, the identitarian politics, the shamefulness of a conservative message seems absolutely absent from this trailer, which gives me hope that it might actually be a good film. Who knows? They may actually cater to an audience that loved the original stories and want to see them come to life. I know, crazy. The movie looks hopeful. The only thing I will tell you about the trailer is that there is zero substance in terms of what actual story we're gonna get. So I'll hold back too much praise for now and just think that Disney will do what they've always done and find a way to screw it up. But maybe, just maybe against all hope, we can put our faith in something bigger than ourselves, a conservative story that will actually value the family and show how important it is for all of us, regardless of race, without making that a central focus or caring too much about diversity. How if we look at virtue and character and morality and we focus on those things, we get a better world. Obviously, I won't hold my breath waiting for Disney to tell that story. They sure used to. But if they tell it again, perhaps we can go back and start supporting them and actually be entertained.
Are you not entertained?
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out our sponsors down below. And if you liked this response video or any of our other videos, you will definitely like what we have to offer as exclusive perks for all of our members. So become a member over at indiethinker.org/support. But most importantly, go with God.